Mark's going to give you a regional profile, a look at the region from a data, and don't feel like you need to be memorize every one of these, but he's going to help you hit the high points, and this PowerPoint will be available to you electronically through CEVEDS, so you can get access to it, so you don't have to copy every single thing in the PowerPoint.
Before I get started here, I want to remind you that each of you have a little survey. And so we want to make sure that you've taken the opportunity to circle the little smiley faces, depending on what you, how you would rate the quality of place in Southeast Vermont today. Now we know you'd like it to be better in the future. Rate it how you see it today. And we'll collect those in just a few minutes. As I begin talking about the regional profile, I need to give credit. And the credit is due to Susan and the Windham Regional Commission. And I haven't corrected my slide yet. It still says planning, but I will. They do planning. They have developed a great, extensive, detailed regional profile that goes down right down to the town and subtown level. We haven't attempted to redevelop that or recreate it, and we're not going to present it all here.
Just if people want to see it directly, go to our publications page on our website.
And that's what I was going to recommend, that you go to their website and you take a look at that. That is going to actually become part of the CEVEDS SEDS as an addendum. It'll sit as an addendum or an appendix to it, because it has such great underlying information in it. What we've done is taken a look at the region at a high level as far as the data is concerned. And we've gone back, when we did the work a couple of years ago, we began and we were using 2007 and then 2009 baseline data. Well, since then we've had the 2010 census, which updates all that information. And with that updated information, we've taken that into account now. And it changes some of our numbers. Why? It changes some of our outlooks. Why? Because the numbers in a decennial census actually are more accurate than the estimates that come in between. And it turns out that the performance of the area, what has occurred under the structure of the economy in this region, was misestimated, because some strange things have gone on in the economy here, in the demographics, in the population, and nobody was doing a good job estimating what was going on. There's a lot of other parts of the economy that don't distinctly fall into something that's measurable and that we can put into a data set. Qualitative things about the community that aren't necessarily quantitative. Those also become part of the profile of the region, and we want to make sure that we give due attention to those, but they don't come out in quite the same quantitative way. What's the outside world look at when they look at the region? This is from a report from Dr. Michael Porter from Harvard University to the Governor Shumlin. And when he prepared this report, he put into it, what does the rest of the region, what does the rest of the world see when they look at Vermont? Well, you can see these little balls here. Red is not so good. Green's really good. Prosperity, where we're at position-wise, ranking with the rest of the states, not so good. Trend, there were some improvements, and we'll talk about why those improvements were coming from. Productivity, Frank talked extensively about productivity. Labor issues, innovation, other strengths and weaknesses of the region. Let's look at the demographics of the region. Now this is challenging. This slide is really busy, but I want you to understand something. And it goes back to what I was saying about information from the Census Bureau. This is 1990, 2000, raw numbers, and then the 2010 estimate that came out in 2005. And what they were looking at was that the population was going to be declining in that in that decennial period. When we actually did the census, what they found out, it was actually pretty flat. It didn't actually decline the way they projected it. In fact, when we got these numbers, we started looking around and saying, how'd they miss it so badly? We looked at MIT's numbers. They did an estimate. MIT missed it just as wildly, in fact, worse, in the opposite direction. We looked at Woods and Poole, who actually does the analysis of a lot of the Census Bureau data after the fact to see if they can validate their numbers. They said, we don't even understand Windham County. Literally. I called them on the phone. They said, we don't understand Windham County. We don't know what's going on. I looked at PopStats and Statistician, and the numbers were so wild. All these demographers, these guys are professionals. That's all they do is demographers. And they said, we don't understand Windham County. What's going on? Well, this is where we're at today, okay? Where we're at today, anybody want to guess? We're the oldest county in the state, in the second oldest state in the nation. In fact, we're the oldest county in both of those states, the other one being Maine. The only place that's older is a county down in Florida where it's all retired people. And they're only there in the wintertime. Okay, well, that has some implications for us. Okay, and those implications come out, quite frankly, in our families, in our schools, and in our workforce. Those demographics are really changing. And look at this. Children, the red is the most current, 2010, down 14%. 20 to 44 age bracket, down 26% from 1990. Okay? 45 to 65, those people nearing retirement, wow, up 94%. That's pretty much 100% change. Okay? And the retired population still increasing. Okay? Where do these statistics come from? Well, people have babies, people die, people move in, people move out. Okay? These little kind of slash columns represent the net change here of births and deaths, an increase in the region. This is not just the county, but the region. 318 over 11 years. Domestic in-migration, out-migration, that's within the United States. People moving to Oklahoma, people coming from California, wherever. Okay? Well, that's not a positive number. It's below the line. That's a negative number. Okay? Interesting. International migration. People from outside the United States. It's the only area that's increasing here. Okay? Net migration, negative 1,000. Now, these numbers may not, if you look at these later on and you say, how come this doesn't quite match with what the other table said? First off, it's not just the county, it's the region. Secondly, there's an adjustment in these numbers that is called the residual that the Census Bureau makes. But anyways, it shows that we're losing population. But by and large, over a 10 or a 20-year period, we've been absolutely flat. Okay? The rest of the United States has been filling that gap of new job creation but low birth rates with immigration. And if we look at our region here, 41% of Windham County is born right where they live. Okay? Born in other parts of the United States, native born, foreign born, we're far behind the rest of the state, we're far behind the region and the United States, significantly. Okay? Employment. You might ask, why are we looking at all these trend numbers? When we see things that either are erratic or declining, it gives us concern about the economy and what the quality of life is going to be like in the future. If you're an educator trying to run a school system and you have fewer children in your system, it's harder to operate a school. If you have a tax base for a community and it's based on your population, or you're in business and you're trying to make sure that your business is successful the next year, or you need to maintain the infrastructure. If there aren't people there, if there aren't jobs there, if there's not a return on your investments, pretty soon the quality of life can't sustain itself. You can't provide the amenities that your community wants. And so we've been seeing this employment change number for the last 20 years. It's just been stagnant, absolutely stagnant. No new employment, okay? Interesting, self-employment during that same time period has been growing, actually, for the last 40 years. Okay? Now, I've taken income numbers and I've put them into real numbers. That means it's dominated in 2010 dollars when the census came out. So, average earnings per job roughly equates to average wage, but is not absolutely the same. But its average earnings per job comes from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Okay? Pretty stagnant there. Look at per capita income. It's been rising. In fact, it's been rising much faster than the United States. Well, where does that money come from? We can break it out and we can take a look at it. 2011, 49% of it came from earned income, private sector earned income. That's actually an increase, an improvement about 1% from 2009. Dividends, interest, and rent, you know, people have stocks. Chris, the people that you invest in stock portfolios, people that own properties, that rent them, have some money in the bank, 19.1%. What do you think it did? Up or down? Actually fell. Okay? Even though the stock market's been pretty good over the last couple of years, improving, that number went down in the region. What went up by a whole percent, or about, by about 0.4%, was transfer payments. Now that transfer payments can be retirement income from pensions, Social Security, but it's also income maintenance, what we would generally call welfare, Medicare, and Medicaid. Okay, 8.3% from public employment. The public employment number is interesting in this region because the earnings are higher than the national average, but the number of jobs is lower. Okay, this is a real interesting look. Yes?
Is the nonprofit sector in the region in that 8.3%?
The nonprofit sector is actually in private here. Okay? It's not in the public.
Would be really interesting to break out.
It would be interesting to break out the nonprofit sector. Okay? It's a great question because throughout New England, there is a higher predominance of nonprofit organizations than there is anywhere else in the United States. Great question. Yes.
Our biggest employers here in Brattleboro are the nonprofits like Brattleboro Retreat, a hospital,
Yep.
And the town of Brattleboro with a couple hundred employees.
Okay, so the town of Brattleboro would be public sector.
Yes, one of
The
the
ret-
biggest employers. Then.
Right? Correct. The retreat, the hospital, that are nonprofits all fall in the private sector as far as the way the Census Bureau collects and assembles the data. Okay? Now, you hear the national report of what GDP is doing. What's GDP growth been this year? We take a look at that at a state level. This is where Vermont sits. It's been lagging behind the United States for a long period of time, both in growth rate and in a look at it on a per capita basis. This box up here would represent being above the national average and having it growing faster. What are the causes of that? Number one cause is demographics. Declining number of jobs, lack of immigration, educational attainment, and we'll talk about educational attainment here in a minute, and a workforce that somebody mentioned it before, that the schools may not be training for the jobs that exist or the jobs that are coming in the future. There's a mix-max between skill sets for workforce, particularly in the middle skill set. Okay, so we look at the structure of the economy as well as the trends that are going on. This is kind of a high-level look at the economy. These are what we call NAICS code sectors. They're just identifier sectors, industries broken into different sectors. Utilities here, obviously we know that that's primarily VY in this region. High-paying jobs, this is the concentration here in the annual growth rate. So the location quotient says if we're at 1, we're at the same as the national average. Below 1, that's this line here, we're less than the national average. Above it, we're greater than national average. 0 here represents no growth. Ranging on up to information sector here, which has a high growth, but a very low representation in this region. For some reason, even though that's a growth industry here, there's very few people employed compared to the national average. Private education, obviously we have a couple of renowned private sector higher education, Marlborough College, World Learning, SIT. Some of these other sectors here, healthcare, obviously we have a great resource here with the Brattleboro Retreat. We have a good local community hospital. So we have some great resources. This is just a look at the structure of the economy. And you can look at these numbers later. They'll be on the website. Okay. Innovation Index. Vermont lags behind the nation and the region, and Windham County, in fact, lags behind the state in measures of innovation, which come from human dynamics, economic dynamics, productivity and employment, and what they measure as economic well-being. Talk about quality of life. The statistics say that we lag behind in those quality of life measures for this region. So this kind of summarizes a whole bunch of statistics that look at trend, prosperity, stress on our economy, and the structure of our economy. So if it's red, it means we're lagging behind the nation. If it's green, we're leading the nation. So that per capita income is higher growth rate than the nation has been. Okay? And again, part of that comes from we're having a lot of high transfer payments here in the state. Unemployment rate, if you've looked at the numbers, we did not get hit in this region, in this state, by the recession as hard as other areas did. Part of that is because this was not an area with a lot of housing development going on. Other sectors of the economy that got hit hard in the recession also were not highly represented in this region. You didn't have a car manufacturer that died on you. Okay? You had suppliers for car manufacturers that suffered, perhaps. Questions? We've gone through this really quick, and I know that the guys filming us, they're going, how am I going to translate everything he said and I couldn't put on the slide? Well, it's on the slides for you. So, any questions on these? Chris?
Basically an observation. I see that there's a silver lining in all that you've said here, although it's not going to actually help us make change, but I think it's important to realize that what we do have here are some of the most sustainable industries. You talk about, for example, information technology, information industries. Well, those are some of the most high turnover and most volatile industries out there. Do we necessarily want to attract those or build them? If we want to attract them, what we're going to do is get things in here that could disappear tomorrow. Two examples from the Boston area are Digital Equipment Corp., which was a major provider. It's gone. Wang Laboratories was major. Those two industries made Route 128 famous. They're gone. And so I'm wondering if we really, really, really want to attract stuff like that. But what we do have as major employers, and will always be here, are the hospitals and the municipality and the other nonprofits in the area. We do have, and the agriculture here too. That is sustainable and growing as an industry. So I think that really needs to be one of the points of reference in the whole approach we have.
That's why we look at this, because we can look at the industries that are here. And we have some great industries here. We have some companies here that make tiny little parts that are really, really valuable. And you don't have to put them on a truck. FedEx picks them up and delivers them to the customer every day. We have companies here that make medical equipment. Medical needs are on the increase. Yes? Question?
Sort of just a slight reiteration of the previous comment. I think as you say that analysis don't understand Windham County, I think it's because we have something really special going on here, that we are a community that knows how to live with less and make high community value out of relatively little. Looking at a 50-year trend as a nation and as an economy, we're going to have to learn to live with less. And as often been in the past, Vermont is ahead because we're behind. And I think that a lot of the trends that you're looking at here and defining as problems, and I'm a little disappointed that this presentation is so problem-oriented rather than asset-oriented. I think one of the great assets that we have is the ability as a community to produce quality of life with less economic activity and with less income. And I would hope that that would be recognized in this process as a great asset that we have to work with in how we improve the quality of life. I'm not saying that we should not be increasing income, but I think increasing affordability of living here is probably a more effective way to invest in a better community.
Let me flip that around, just if I can, for just a second. I've been working extensively up in Aroostook County, Maine, and Washington County, Maine. Now, you have an energy cost in this region that is almost exactly half of their energy cost up there for electric utilities. Not only that, but they are, for heating purposes, almost exclusively. They've been about 92% dependent upon oil, imported oil, for a heating source. And their energy cost for electrical energy, because they're isolated on the grid, is about 16 to 17 cents per kilowatt versus about 8 or 9 here. They developed a strategy that goes right to the question you addressed. It's called a wealth retention strategy. And they've developed some alternative energies to use some of the biomass that they have, the forest resources that are there, to create pellets that they also then are creating the stoves to put in the homes. They've created a whole strategy around that. And in the last year, a year and a half ago, they set a goal to convert 10 institutional or commercial buildings to biomass. In the first 6 months, they did 12. The savings was over $3 million a year, and 4 of those institutions were school districts. Kept money right home in their pockets. They have a goal to do the same type of conversions for homes. They're looking at other types of alternative energy issues. So I hope nobody thinks that this is a one-sided look at the world, okay? Economic development, opportunities come from when there are challenges that face us. You had a question?
Yes, Susan Keith, Vermont Public Radio.
Yes.
I just wonder what then do you make of the unpredictability by all these expert demographers of Windham County? What does it mean to you?
So what we're seeing is that the trend doesn't match what's going on in the nation. It also doesn't match what is the underlying resources in the region or the assets that you have. There's a mismatch there. It also defines for us that there is a certain preference for life in this region. That's unarguable. There's a certain type of people who want to live here and are able to live here. Not everybody is able to do that. And so we need to match our economic development strategy to the resources we have and the reality here. Okay? That's why it's called a regional plan. We're not trying to put Silicon Valley in southeast Vermont. There was another hand back here.
Yeah, I just want to build on what Doug said a little bit, because when Doug spoke previously, Frank said, well, you know, the metric has to be dollars and wages and so forth. I think that this point is going to come up as we do our whatever we call them, hearings, meetings in various places, because you know, not everything can be measured by dollars and cents. You know, there's sort of a happiness metric that is much more vague, but it's real. And so, for example, if a neighborhood, folks in a neighborhood take care of each other's kids, there is no dollars being exchanged, versus if they all send them to daycare, now there are jobs being created and there's money changing hands, but the same effort, the same work, the same result, is coming out of that. Which of those is a better situation? The one that puts more dollars into the metric, or the one where the neighborhood or the community is taking care of each other in various ways? And so I would just urge that some non-monetary metrics go into the mix here.
That's why you are doing a survey today, right at the beginning, so we can get your feedback on what you think the quality of place is in this community and what it means. And Andy, or Adam.
In all these numbers, we look at the birth rates, the death rates, the declining population in the child rearing years, and the decline in school enrollment. Have you looked at the percentage of educated people, bachelor degrees or higher, who have left in the last 10 years? Are those 20 to 44-year-olds leaving that don't have college education, or where is that?
Can I save that question for a little bit later? We're going to talk about it in relationship to the larger region, because I actually have a couple slides on it. Okay, we actually have some information. I'm going to take one more question, and then we've got to move on.
Clarification on the demographics.
Yes.
You mentioned the growth in 45 to 65-year-olds.
Yes.
Which you said was quite extraordinary, and maybe because I'm in that demographic, I thought there was a hint of they're about to retire, this isn't good. Whereas one might read it as here are people chosen to live here and who might be at the height of their productivity. So I just wanted to query that.
There wasn't a hint of negativity in about it. I hit 55 this year. Okay, so I'm getting there. I'm in that age bracket. But there, and as my wife says, as my mother says, who's 92, she says, well, there's no bonus points for hitting 100. I'll take it when it comes. The reality is that if you're an employer and 50% of your employees are over a certain age, and you're wondering, how am I going to replace those employees? If you're Brattleboro Hospital, if you're the Retreat, if you're the city, or any other employer, and you're saying, how am I going to replace those retirees? And where is that workforce going to come from? And you have nothing in the pipeline to fill it with. That is where the challenge comes for the employer. I'm not saying it's a negative for the community, all of us who want to live in a community. But as an employer, you have this workforce question. Where's David? There he is, back in the corner. David's our workforce expert here, right? One of our workforce experts. Okay? And as companies come to him and say, where's my future workforce going to come from? And David has to say, well, I don't know. I got all these old people that, they're not going to go back for retraining when they're 65. They're at the height of their productivity, but they're not going to go back and retrain for a new job. And they need little skill set workforce rather than retiring workforce. That's the point, is that I'm addressing it from that particular question from the employer's standpoint.
Can I just comment quickly?
What?
I get now what you were saying. And remember, you said 45 to 65. And I think our experience at the Marlborough College graduate programs is that is exactly the demographic that's coming back to get trained for another career. And so,
Good point.
we should just acknowledge that is happening in Windham County.
That is great. That is great to hear. Okay, we do need to move on.